Bobby Broyles and Tim McDonald here.
Should be a really interesting matchup. Buckle up. If you're not watching, you got some problems.
Back for more with only 2 Saturdays left in the regular season. I'm Bobby Broyles along with Tim McDonald for This Week in CAA Football presented by Geico. Tim, you don't have to look far in the headlines from last week after JMU and Richmond put on a show last Saturday in the latest chapter of this rivalry.
A phenomenal display. A game right now where JMU, the win, now JMU's in the driver's seat for that auto bid. The only unbeaten team left right now in CAA football with a 6-0 record. More importantly, already 8 wins and 1 loss, and that 1 loss was to FBS foe North Carolina. But besides the obvious wins, I mean, think about where James Madison has already won games this year on the road. At Maine, at New Hampshire, and at Richmond. None of those places are easy to win. No. Brian Shore last week, I thought he played as well as he needed to for his team, and it showed. 22 of 28 for 3 touchdowns. 2 to tight end Jonathan Klosterman. That was a phenomenal catch, a phenomenal play late that put them ahead. That was the difference maker with 1:36 left. I thought the difference also was Shore's feet. 91 rushing yards. We saw the first play of offensive from forced scrimmage from JMU. It was that huge Shore run, and all day it gave Richmond a little bit more to think about on defense. I also thought JMU averaged over 6 yards per carry. That told the story of the game. Tough loss for Richmond considering Kyle Auletta had 5 touchdowns passing, didn't play that bad, but he was sacked 3 times, had negative 20-plus yards rushing. So I think, again, that was one of the factors. You can't think about the loss now. If you're Richmond, you still have to play Delaware. At least that one's at home, then head to William & Mary to close out the regular season. A tough loss because do you say, well, do you want to lose 2 games at the beginning of the season or no, you're going to have 2 losses at the end of the season? It's very tough for Richmond, but you need to move on if you're quick. Right now, for Villanova, the defense beat Maine. I think the defense could take that win. 26-7, a career high, 326 passing yards for Zach Bednarczyk and 3 touchdowns. Neither team, Maine or Nova, had 100 yards rushing. Nova forced 4 picks, and more importantly, held Maine to 0 for 5 from the red zone. Gotta love CAA football in November now, because of course you got Villanova coming back home to host JMU, another top 10 matchup, and another matchup that is going to decide the CAA title. That's what November's all about. William & Mary and Delaware each earned road wins last week. Tried beat Stony Brook 14-9, took a safety late, but did ultimately win that game also because of its defense. The Blue Hens beat Albany impressively, 33-17. Troy Reeder played lights out. The defense also got it done, but both now will try to play spoiler this week. And of course, you got to give shouts to Towson. First CAA victory of the season, which is surprising in itself, but the victory over Elon, a much-needed win for the Tigers.
Well, let's dive into the game of the week in CAA football at 1 o'clock as JMU travels to Villanova. So much at stake with the conference title on the line, playoff positioning, and on top of that, Andy Talley's last regular season home game at Villanova. This is a juicy one here, Tim.
Juicy one indeed. November at its finest, 2 teams battling for the conference title just 1 week after earning arguably their most impressive wins of the season. That's a rarity, and that's awesome that we have it this week lining up. Talk all the time about attitude, mindset, week in and week out. Here it is on center stage again. Good teams not only find ways to win in tough places, but also find ways to move on quickly. JMU understands what's at stake, and at the same time, so does Villanova.
Yes.
Number 1 scoring, number 1 rushing offense in the Dukes versus the number 1 scoring defense and the number 1 rushing defense in the Wildcats. So you kind of know what's at stake, you know what to expect. Kind of expecting Nova to try and find a way to control the tempo of the game. We saw last week I thought JMU did such a good job against Richmond because it wanted to play at its speed, and it did. I thought Bednarczyk and crew, when the run game wasn't working, picked it up with the passing game, obviously, in that win over Maine. JMU's lone weakness, if you can call it a weakness on defense right now, is its pass defense. Last in conference, allowing 7.5 yards per catch and 247 yards per game. I think JMU's, the skill positions, the wide receivers, the kick returners, had the edge last week. 4 players had at least 5 catches. And can do it again this week, but it's not as if Nova's defense can't handle that. Right now, Nova, 171 yards allowed per game through the air and 12 picks all season. Talked about 4 picks last week. If Madison has balance like it has most of the year, I think the Dukes will be that much better off. Keep an eye on 2 of the best rushing quarterbacks who might not get as much notice for their rushing abilities, but in Shore and Bednarczyk, if those 2 run free all day, this could be a high-scoring affair. JMU right now, with the win, can clinch the automatic playoff bid for the CAA and at least a share of the CAA title. Villanova moves into a tie with a victory for first place and likely also clinches a playoff berth. I mean, both of these teams right now reeling for a win, but the amount of momentum that a win carries in this one is well beyond what the actual outcome will be.
Indeed, a lot on the line in that one, Tim. It should be exciting. Before that one at noon in Durham, New Hampshire comes off the bye to take on Albany. The Wildcats still right in the thick of the conference title race, while the Great Danes likely need to win out to have a shot at receiving that large berth.
And I think a lot of people forget that, but the Danes ended this one having lost 4 or 5 games overall, but still alive in that playoff picture. You get to the 7 wins and 4 losses, you're still in the playoff picture. The key has been the offense, especially as of late. Last week in that Delaware loss, Albany had 7 yards total in the second half. Right now, only averaging 118 yards per game through the air, and have had just 163 total passing attempts all season long. New Hampshire hasn't played since that last weekend in October versus Stony Brook. I think the bye week this late in the season only helped the Wildcats here. 6-3 now, 5-1 in conference play. Like you said, still alive technically in that conference race.
Yes.
Last time out, the defense had 4 picks. The offense took advantage. Might not have been the greatest show for the offense, but a season-high 43 points off quick turnovers, off quick scores. Back in Durham for a noon start. I think the rushing defense is going to need to be huge if UNH wants a chance to win this one. Limited Stony Brook to 103 yards rushing, and actually ranks 3rd in the league with 125 rushing allowed per game and a CAA low, 7 rushing touchdowns allowed. New Hampshire's offense might not, like I said, wow teams all the time, but when its defense is playing that well, the yards and stats haven't needed to match up. So you look at the stats and say, well, that isn't really translating over, but it just worked out that way. I think the Albany defense has, not only last week, but the defense has kept this team in it late. Despite the score last week, I think it just right now you need to stay the course. If you're Nicastro, I think the leader of that team, you need to get your guys and rally and say we need to stay. It's incredibly tough for a defense to have that mentality when the offense is struggling, when the offense is not putting up points and having you in games all the time. A win for either squad keeps the playoff hopes alive, no doubt, and a loss likely ends that chance for both teams.
Also at noon on the American Sports Network, William & Mary hits the road for the 2nd straight week for a matchup with Towson. Both teams coming off big wins last week, but who will keep the momentum going Saturday?
I think it's a tough answer because both of these teams right now are not fighting for playoff berths, but fighting for a strong finish to end the season. Tribe D showed up last week and then some. A 14-9 win at Stony Brook. We talked about that safety late, so the score was kind of odd, but did not allow a touchdown. That held Stony Brook to 2 of 12 on 3rd down and 210 total yards. Towson on the other end found some juice finally, especially on offense. Morgan Mahalik came in and I thought provided a spark. 12 of 24 for 148, 2 touchdowns. I think he just added a little bit of change of tempo. Freshman Shane Simpson, talked about him a lot, especially in the special teams throughout the season, but he had 187 rushing yards, the most for a Tiger running back this season, and also played, like we said, huge on special teams, 271 all-purpose yards. He's going to be a game changer in this contest, especially. I expect William Merrick to keep the ball away from him. First conference win for Towson all season, and coming back home, that's going to help for momentum's sake, but that Tribe defense is going to try to force the Tigers to beat them through the air. Only allow right now 156 yards per game, 2nd in the conference, and I think William Mary is well aware of that. For me, it comes down to the Tribe run game versus the Towson defense. If there's room all day, I think William Mary can score. If not, the Tigers will have a shot with this new look kind of offense and be able to keep up.
At 1:30, Rhode Island and Elon face off for the first time as conference members.
Rhodey's first game since that tough JMU loss. Well, Elon has lost 5 straight overall. 2 offenses right now that, quite honestly, are struggling. They're ranked 2nd and 2nd to last in CA football for scoring, so we know where the issues have been the last few weeks. Both teams also struggle against the run, so something has to give there. Phoenix have advantage of coming home. Rhode has the advantage, I think, of that extra week and kind of reset and prepare for this one, just take a step back. Jordan Villanova versus Daniel Towson, whichever QB takes care of the ball, is going to have his team come out on top. Obvious statement, but I think it's true. The Phoenix can have the edge rushing, I think, with McNair and Summers, but the Rams have the edge passing. We've seen Visano, especially in last week, throw the ball all around. But again, it comes down which team at this point in the year wants it more, plain and simple.
Shortly after at 2, Stony Brook and Maine play on Long Island. This is a bigger game than most think because just like Albany, both of these teams probably have to win out to receive attention for an at-large berth for the postseason.
Yeah, it's a lot like the Danes in New Hampshire. The winner of this game is still very much alive in the playoff picture, in my mind at least. Remember Stony Brook just 3 weeks ago, 5-2, 4-0. And now has lost 2 straight. We saw both Joe Carbone and Pat Irwin for the Seawolves in last week's loss. The 2 only combined, though, to pass for 53 yards. The offense is going to tell the story again this week. We know the ability, the defense is going to have to keep it close in this one. Maine, meanwhile, snapped a 5-game winning streak. We've talked about that loss to Villanova, but a tough offensive game. Dan Collins did have 235 yards, but also tossed 4 picks. And we talked about the 5 red zone chances, and Maine came up short on all 5 of those chances. Maine is 3-2 on the road this year and has been good against the run. The Black Bears have the advantage in the passing game, I think, in this one versus Stony Brook's passing game, but you have to take care of the ball against a Seawolves defense that, like I said, if the offense isn't getting it done, this team has shown the ability to still be able to help win games just because of that defensive play.
Week 11 concludes at 3:30 on Comcast Sportsnet as Richmond looks to bounce back against a Delaware team that now has won 2 in a row.
This is suddenly a very interesting game, a fitting way to end an important week. Spiders as mentioned, played well for nearly the entire game. You could argue the worst offensive drive that they had of that game was the final one of that game. Despite, let's remember, led JMU late and gave up that late score. 2 losses on the year now. I think you just have to come home and regroup and forget that one. And it's easy to say here now, but Delaware, on the other hand, found its mojo on defense. So we talk about Troy Reeder, but one of the defense's best games all season. 2 fumbles, 2 picks last week. 17 points, more importantly, were scored off of all of the Albany's turnovers. Bruins now have nothing to lose in this one, but also have the advantage of riding that 2-game winning streak. Wes Hills and Thomas Jefferson, I thought, did a pretty good job last week. Carried the load. Each had 16 rushing attempts, and I expect the same thing to happen this week. You know what Delaware's going to do. I think it's how does Richmond respond? Coming off a well-played game versus a good opponent, all the eyes of the FCS were on that game, and know that you lost that game. Look at Thompson. I thought he played a little bit better than I thought he could against JMU last week. 128 rushing yards and helped the balance. 4 Spider receivers last week had 50-plus yards receiving, of course led by Brown, and also Bevels played well. Good news for Richmond is that the pass defense right now is still leading the conference in yards allowed, and Delaware right now is last in CA football in passing with 84 yards per game. Both teams love time of possession, which I think is a little bit unknown of Richmond, that they love time of possession. Both average over 30 minutes a game. I think that's going to be a huge factor again on Saturday.
CAFootball.com is your home for all the links needed on Saturday, as well as broadcast information for TV games in your area. As if the Villanova and JMU contest wasn't big enough, Tim and Mike will be on site in Philly as part of on-campus coverage. What do you two have in store this week, Tim?
Head to the main line. I might have to grab a cheesesteak or 2, but for Coach Sally's final regular season home game, we'll be checking in with him, talking to him about his time at Villanova, as well as talking to some current players and some former players all weekend long, so be on the lookout for us. But the latest and next Going Deep feature, I should say, will be out next Thursday, and I know throughout the week we'll be previewing that on social media, and we'll also talk about it in the next week edition of This Week in CA Football.
Absolutely. Look forward to that indeed. That is it from us today. Thank you for tuning in. Enjoy the game Saturday.